Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 865. Earl Hall's Suggestion. £10,000. Audrey blinked as she used a very slight change in expression to express her surprise. Without needing her to voice out her question, Earl Hall had noticed her puzzlement. He chuckled and said, "This is an insightful man. His ideas have inspired me and resonated with me. Besides, we can't ignore the misery that objectively exists just because it cannot be resolved anytime soon." Audrey vaguely understood her father, but she felt that she didn't fully understand him. She nodded slightly and took out her checkbook from her purse that matched her dress and wrote down the £1,000 value. This was a charity ball. Furthermore, it was held in a side hall of the cathedral, so there weren't any dances or extravagant arrangements. There weren't any valets or ladies' maids following by their sides. It was simply a charity event that had some degree of donations involved. The ladies undoubtedly brought their bags on them. The guests subsequently threw their checks into the donation box and headed for the two long tables for some beverages or simple food. After which, they walked around the hall socializing instead of sitting. This was closer to that of a buffet party. Klein also accompanied Electra and came to St. Anthony's side and was introduced to him. St. Anthony smiled in response to Dwayne Dantes' greeting. He sized him up and said, "Very good. We are proud to have a believer like you. It's the goddess that has taught us that character is more important than status. Therefore, you are an extremely honorable gentleman." To be frank, faced with this saint, Klein's heart was drumming because deities or beyonders related to the fate domain was able to see the gray fog's aura on him. For example, everyone from the monster pathway or the Evernight goddess who wielded the authority of misfortune. As for St. Anthony, if he was a high-sequence beyonder of the sleepless pathway and grasped beyonder powers involving misfortune, then there was a chance that he could see that there was a problem with Dwayne Dantes. As such, Klein had headed above the gray fog to divine so before attending the charity party. He received the answer that there wasn't any danger. Since the goddess didn't say anything, even if her archbishop were to discover some problems, he will probably feign ignorance. Klein replied with a warm smile. "I've been to the cathedral frequently to pray and listen to Bishop Electra's preachings in recent times. Even my soul seems to have been cleansed. Therefore, I abided by the goddess's teachings to pass such beauty and hope to others." St. Anthony nodded and said, "In front of the goddess, all believers are differentiated by their character, regardless if they are nobles or commoners, male or female. They are all the same. I hope those people who live in poor environments will liberate themselves of fear and receive serenity. Praise the Lady." Klein and Electra tapped their chests 4 times in a clockwise fashion. "Praise the Lady!" Seeing St. Anthony turn towards the other believers, Klein planned on heading over to the table to get a glass of champagne to quench his thirst. At this moment, he saw a gentleman approach him. This man had somewhat loose skin with an obvious potbelly. However, it could be seen that he was rather handsome in his youth. Even now, his blue eyes that had a smile on them and his beautiful mustache made him appear good-looking. Klein had previously learned from Mock's introduction and knew he was the House of Lords Member of Parliament and powerful banker, Earl Hall. Of course, to him, the most important identity of this noble was that he was Miss Justice's father. And Audrey happened to be by his side. She was observing Dwayne Dantes with her bright eyes, awaiting her conversation with the gentleman later. This made Klein immediately feel a little uncomfortable. I need to present the persona that matches Dwayne Dantes. A person of ordinary birth who's working hard to get himself into high society. At this moment, he's bound to be a little nervous and restrained. Likewise, a gentleman who loves beautiful women will feel the same feelings when faced with the most stunning gem in Backlund's eyes. But he will also unknowingly showcase his own breadth of knowledge and show his charms to express his desire. Yes, an experienced tycoon who survived the chaos must be someone who has pride and confidence hidden in him. No matter what he faces, he will try his best to appear calm, respectful but not sycophantic. Klein's thoughts raced as he smiled and politely said to the approaching Earl Hall, "Honorable Earl, I happened to see the check you donated. Your kindness and generosity truly impresses me. Yet you've never flaunted that or informed others how much you've donated. Earl Hall chuckled. No, compared to you, the price I pay is far inferior to what you made. Between the lines, he meant that £15,000 might be a tenth of Dwayne Dante's overall wealth, or even a fifth, but £10,000 to him was just a thousandth, or even lesser. Clearly, the former paid a greater price, and his willingness to do was even more pure. From my point of view, as long as the poor who yearn to use knowledge to change their fates can be helped, all donations are kind and sufficiently benevolent. From this angle, the only difference between £10,000 and £15,000 is just £5,000. Klein tried hard to express his sincerity, as he deliberately glanced at the listening blonde girl without leaving a trace. He knew that an ordinary, without a trace, was obvious in the eyes of a spectator. Audrey wore a faint smile as she silently listened to her father's and Dwayne Dante's conversation, as though she hadn't noticed the gentleman peek at her. This made Klein lack confidence from his failure at receiving any feedback in his performance. Earl Hall laughed and said, Then we shall agree to disagree. This isn't anything bad. At the very least, we are praising one another. I can tell that you once had a difficult period and had once led the life of the poor. Klein nodded and said, I do not avoid such a past. They are my valuable riches. And this is something me and my friends lack. Earl Hall commented with a smile. And it's because of this that you possess a unique and wise point of view. I hope there will be opportunities in the future to work with you. That is also something I look forward to. Klein replied with a suitable level of sincerity. Earl Hall pointed to the side and said, A couple of friends are waiting for me. I hope that your charitable ways and wealth keep increasing. Klein didn't drag on the conversation as he drew the crimson moon on his chest. Praise the lady. Praise the lady. Earl Hall and Audrey tapped their chests in a clockwise fashion in unison. Watching them walk past him and in another direction, Klein secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he tensed up as he naturally looked around the hall and noticed the shadow at the door. Silently sitting there was the golden retriever. On the carriage back to Empress Borough, Earl Hall, who looked like he was resting with his eyes closed, looked at his daughter and said, Audrey, didn't you mention that you wished to join one of the church's charitable organizations? Are you interested in joining this bursary foundation? Audrey had already sensed that her father might have such thoughts back in the cathedral, so she expressed the appropriate level of surprise and confusion. It's only a small charity foundation. Audrey's brother, Hibbert Hall, argued for his sister. Earl Hall shook his head and laughed. I've asked a few bishops. The total amount of donations tonight has already reached £100,000. Why do you think there's so much? Hibbert frowned slightly as he said in thought. They were bribed. At the same time, Audrey gave her own point of view. Knowledge and the relaxing of the electoral qualifications. Earl Hall nodded and sighed. Nothing is in essential existence, including humans themselves as well as the nobility. He then looked at Audrey and said with a smile, There's no need to force yourself. I can get others to join the Bursary Foundation. I just wish that you will gain more knowledge because of this and now view certain matters as definite and immutable. Even if you miss this, there will be other charity organizations. Father, I'll consider it. Audrey replied seriously. After hearing Dwayne Dante's recount of the stories of the poor, she had already decided on joining to gather more donations, to contact the government, and organize events to contribute her efforts to the cause. She was hesitant because she felt that the middle-aged man was a little problematic. After returning home, Audrey immediately brought Susie to her room and closed the door. What's your take on that, Mr. Dwayne Dantes? Audrey asked directly. The golden retriever sat opposite her and thought. He seems to know you or something on you. Also, a lot of the time, he's acting and leaving a certain degree of clues. He seemed to be guarded against me. He's extremely sharp, yes, I noticed it too. He might be a beyonder. He acted very well, but it's still an act. However, this is also very ordinary. At a social event, and faced with different people, We would all play different roles and engage in a corresponding act, Audrey said in thought. The biggest problem stems from his shock when he saw me. He was almost horrified. Also, he was embroiled in 2 cases, one after another, especially with that case regarding Bear and Sindras. It seems to have some beyonder elements involved in it, with signs of someone being cued to do so. Susie gaped her mouth, unable to give a definitive explanation. All she could do was woof. Audrey began another train of thought. I'll get someone to investigate Dwayne Dantes, and after confirming that there aren't any major problems, I'll join the Bursary Foundation. All right, it's almost Monday. I can request Furs and Mr. Moon. They're both in Backland. Monday afternoon at 3. Dark red beams shot up in the Grand Palace, materializing into blurry figures. Audrey quickly surveyed the area and looked to the seat of honor at the bronze, long table and bowed with a smile. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool.